Welcome to At the Table with Tony. My name is Anthony Scilia, better known as Tony Manja, and today is our second part of our two-part episode of concentrating on Italian enclaves and talking with the board members of the Italian Enclaves Historical Society. So today I'm being joined by president and founder of the Italian Enclaves Historical Society, Raymond Guarini. We're also being joined by John Viola of the Italian American Podcast, as well as Umberto Mucci from Italians, and Stephen LaRocca of the St. Rocco Society of Potenza in New York City. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking some time out and coming on the show today.
Always a pleasure, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. So, Ray, again, like I said, you are the president and the founder of the Italian Enclaves Historical Society. So, kind of, we talked a lot about it last night, but give us a quick rehashing of what is the Italian Enclaves Historical Society.
Sure, absolutely. For folks who weren't able to see the episode from yesterday, it's very simple. About several years ago, I was just having a discussion with a friend about how a lot of the places in our neighborhood were starting to close. And I said, I wonder if this is happening elsewhere. It was just a curiosity. So it sparked the chord, and I ended up traveling to a few places and creating like a list of places to see, A, if that was happening there, but B, also to catalog some of the places and churches, because I noticed that they were rapidly closing. We just took to the road, went on weekend road trips to break up the monotony of work, and wound up in New Haven, Boston, Baltimore, all different places. And then it just became an obsession. And there was like a pivotal moment when I was invited by John, while John was the head of the National Italian American Foundation, to go to their gala event in Washington, D.C. to sit on a panel. And that was pivotal. That was really what pushed me over the edge and gave me the confidence to, move this forward and continue doing what I'm doing. And it's been a blessing since then. I've had the blessing of being able to meet people like Stephen LaRocca and get involved in ancient, long-standing 130-year-old traditions like the procession of St. Rocco. I met Umberto Mucci of We the Italians, and everybody was on last night. So it's just been a tremendous blessing in my life that I can't help but share with people. So we created the Italian Enclaves social media accounts. They got popular. They grew rapidly, and ever since then, it's really been history. Last year, we formulated it into a nonprofit, so it would be easy to fund a website to create the catalog, so that we could put these places up there, hopefully in perpetuity.
I tell you, and you're doing an amazing job, because really every day you have some more images, pictures from these different Italian enclaves. Some of them unfortunately no longer exist, but for you to be able to document this is very important, because we need to have a way to preserve our Italian American culture and heritage. So hats off to you for that.
Thank you, and likewise, Tony. I mean, your show is phenomenal. I keep saying that I can't wait for you to get onto the Food Network. You need your own. You really do. You need your own show. And the work that John does with the Italian American Podcast and Stephen LaRocca. Let me tell you this: not many people could really understand how hard it is to put together a procession. Okay, what we're doing here is, I've got to say, I mean, I think it's just almost too easy for me to go on and share photos. The going out and getting the photos and sourcing them is kind of hard. It's difficult. I shouldn't say it's difficult. It's just hard. But what Stephen does all year, it's a year-long work to go ahead and have one day of processing a saint for two neighborhoods. It's unbelievable. I mean, just the amount of work, bureaucracy involved, dealing with the city, getting everybody on the same page. And he's just absolutely the spark plug. And if it wasn't for him, it wouldn't exist. So I really think we should take our hats off to Stephen and Umberto for We the Italians. Umberto has been in quarantine, and then I'm going to stop talking. But Umberto's been in quarantine now 36 days, and every single day consistently posts a video and consistently still maintains the We the Italians website and shares other people's stuff from all over the world, especially in the United States and Rome. And he bridges the two flags and makes them into one heart. And that's phenomenal. I've got to tip my hat to him too.
Absolutely. So let's start with Umberto. Umberto, you are based in Italy. You have your website. So kind of explain who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about We the Italians.
As once my dear friend John Viola told me, I'm an Italian American honorary.
Yes.
And as he told that, I know that it's true because he is the one who could appoint me. I'm just I'm just an Italian guy who loves the United States and the Italian American community, and thinks that Italy needs America and needs the Italian American passion and love for this country. And I learned how much beautiful people, how many fantastic boys and girls, men and women are in the Italian American community. I learned so much about the United States and about Italy by meeting them. And so we are a media company based in Rome. We have a newsletter which goes to 100,000 people in the United States. We have a magazine about Italian excellence in English for free online. We post every day 25 news about Italy and the United States, or positive things about Italy. We are an aggregator of news, actually. We have an archive of more than 1,400 websites regarding Italy in the United States from a non-commercial point of view. So, of course, there's the Italian Enclaves and the Italian Podcast, of course, and NIAF. And then I do interviews. Every 15 days, I do an interview to somebody who tells me something different from his or her point of view regarding Italy in the United States. And these interviews are also in books that I presented in the United States and in Italy. In Italy, in Turin, I had the pleasure to have John, who was very kind to come to the presentation. And so this is me, and I've been in quarantine for 38 days now. And I think it's kind of therapeutic to do these videos. At the beginning, I wasn't very sure because I'm not very good at being under the lights, you know. But it's interesting because I can try to understand what's happening, try to tell the Italian Americans what's happening in Italy. And also, some of the things that are happening here will happen in the United States in a way or another way in 10 days or more or less. And so it could be interesting for you guys who are in the United States, because you could try to understand which are our mistakes and what's expecting you, even if, to be honest, nobody knows exactly what's expecting all of us. But we will survive. We will go out. I'm sure that the United States and Italy will be free of this thing until the end of before the end of 2020.
I hope
God
so.
willing.
Yeah, these are definitely unprecedented times. I mean, to think, you know, what it did to what it's done to our economy here in America and throughout the world. I mean, this is just, like I said, I've talked about this numerous times on the show. Like in my life, I'm 37 years old. I've never seen anything like this ever. I mean, to literally shut down the world. This is mind blowing. So that's why it's so great to be able to, even though we're practicing social distancing, we are still connected as one community in a way over the Wi-Fi and the internet. So thank you very much, Umberto.
My pleasure.
I'd like you to please speak next. You have an amazing podcast, the Italian American Podcast. One of the, I mean, it really is. It is the premier Italian American podcast out there. So what you guys are doing is really unbelievable. So take it away.
Well, thank you, Tony. That's a big compliment coming from you, because you studied this stuff. I have an anthropology degree, so you're the pro. Yeah, I know everybody here through various walks of life, and spent 6 years as the president of the National Italian American Foundation before thinking that I was going to escape being a professional Italian American and go and do some other businesses, which, you know, started to do some work with my brother and my family. And then the opportunity came along to join what was already existed in the Italian American Podcast. And we created our own show called the Italian American Power Hour. And eventually, after about a little over a year, we merged the two together. And I have made this my full-time gig yet again, to be a professional Italian American. So I did not escape nearly like I thought I would. And got to know Ray originally through just admiring his work. And the Italian Enclaves is, you know, deep in my soul and everybody's soul, and the idea that even if we can't necessarily preserve everything, we can catalog it and understand it. And, you know, look, there's plenty of new businesses popping up and things like that, and they have to know what their forebears were and what authentic is and what the material culture of our community's been. So Ray's doing an amazing job.
Thank you, John.
Yeah,
Amen
and
to
getting
that.
to know him over the years and seeing his expertise, asking him to speak. I mean, obviously working with Umberto a lot while I was at NEAF because he's my favorite Italian because he loves and respects our community. And when Ray asked me to jump on and join this board, I didn't hesitate for a second. I thought it'd be an amazing opportunity to be around great people doing really good work.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
And we have Stephen LaRocca. He is the president of the San Rocco Society of Potenza in New York City. One of, if not the oldest percent in the country, correct, Stephen?
Well, it's certainly not the oldest. There are a few. In fact, Mr. Viola, I think your País beats us by a year. I don't know.
Yeah, 1888.
You beat us by a year. So there are, but we're up there. I don't think there are more than 5 in the country that have our longevity. Lady Mount Carmel in Hamilton, New Jersey, Marona Neve, us. There's not too many. There may be 1 or 2 others that I'm remiss in.
I think Holy Cross in Easton is pretty old.
I don't know the exact age of that.
Yeah.
I'm just glad this is on the record forever so I could show John Napoli that we're a year older. And Stephen gave it to me. That's awesome.
I had to give it to you. Come on. The truth is the truth. I speaking of feeling remiss, I have not participated in any meaningful way, even though Ray invited me to be honored to be on the board. And a lot of that has to do with just everyday life, but it also has a lot to do with St. Rocco, which is, we have to come to grips now with what's in front of us. We are hoping to celebrate in August our 131st feast, but it may not happen. It may not happen. And that was soul searching for me. I have a candle burning to St. Rocco day and night in my house, to protect us all. And as I said in an earlier podcast with Tony and Ray, he is the most appropriate saint for the season. I mean, the saint of infectious diseases and plagues. And his popularity in Italy came from being introduced during the cholera epidemic. So, we're looking forward to it. But I think these podcasts are an example of how we're not giving up. We're finding other ways to express ourselves. If, God forbid, this year certain feasts are not held, they'll be held with greater pomp and circumstance next year. I mean, we can't give up. There's a big danger with all the things we do by not doing something, because 1 year turns into 2 years, and then there were over 3,000 feasts in the 1920s in the Italian Enclave, and now we're down to probably maybe 250, 300. And a lot of that comes from, well, we won't do it this year, but we'll get back to it, and we never do. So we all have to keep whatever we're doing alive. And again, maybe off point or off topic for the moment, but I think Ray's genius in creating the Italian enclaves is so important, because I cannot, where St. Rocco's feast was no longer exists. We were founded on Roosevelt Street in the Lower East Side, and in 1958 to make way for urban development, the streets were all destroyed. And so the area where we were born no longer exists, and there aren't that many photos. Now, from 58 to 5 years ago, we were at St. Joseph's on Monroe and Catherine. The diocese closed that church. And really, the only way you would know that was a sprawling Italian neighborhood is at the top of St. Joseph's, the word San Giuseppe. We had Vanilla Funeral Home, that closed 2 years ago, and every Italian business is gone. So with the exception of elderly Italian Americans, a handful that are there, there's no record that we existed there. And I think Americans are starting to believe that the millions of Italian Americans of the Lower East Side all lived on 2 blocks of Mulberry Street. I mean, they don't get how vast this area was and how it stretched all the way to Alphabet City and stretched into the village. And, our friend Marco Antonio Pisano, the great entertainer and very, very humble historian, and let me tell you, I don't know anyone that has the knowledge he has, points out that there was an Italian-American community where Lincoln Center stands, community from Ischia, and how many feasts they had there. And I know where the United Nations now stands. There was a community from Nauru in Sicily, and they had a feast for San Calogero there. These are all things no one knows, and with each church closing and each old Italian retiring or dying, they're lost. So kudos to you, Ray, and to everyone for everything that we're doing, because if we don't do it, I'm an old guy with a little kid. I have a 9-year-old son, and I want him to be able to have these, not only the memories of what his father told him, but also for it to be a lived history. There's nothing worse than things that are just in a book.
Yeah.
We need books. I love books. You know, I didn't become a lawyer because I hate books, but I think we really desperately need to keep our culture alive, and that's a Southern Italian peasant culture. With all due respect to the glories of Northern Italy and such, we are the grandchildren, the great grandchildren, the children of Southern Italian peasants who brought a very ancient Mediterranean culture here, and remarkably, we've kept it. And I think in this, you know, I'm older than you guys, but this resurgence is happening, and it's wonderful. And I think a lot of it is based on love of grandparents and great grandparents or other relatives or neighbors, people that made a difference in your life, and you want to hold on to it. So I applaud everybody for doing that. And a quick thing with regard to donating, you know, I'm impressed again with everyone's efforts to try to get masks and whatnot for hospitals. And I also feel as though I've dropped the ball here with St. Rocco, but of all societies, we will certainly be reaching out. I think it might be most appropriate for us to try to get our supplies to some hospital, maybe Bellevue or some hospitals that are in the lower Manhattan area, and as well as to our precinct. You know, they've been so great to us during the feast, and I have such a relationship with them. But a part of trying to work and stay alive and stay sane, you do forget things. And I'm just literally, as I'm speaking, I'm grateful to be with you guys, but I'm grateful that it came to my mind. I want to reach out to our community affairs police officers and see how we can get them some supplies that they might otherwise not have. But
excellent. I mean, speaking about, I just want to mention one thing that I just saw today, that they canceled the San Ubaldo festival in Gubbio.
Yeah.
So which will probably then transfer, the one in Jessup will probably more than likely either be canceled or postponed, which is, so that this is, it's already affecting the feast season. Actually, next week they were supposed to have a feast of San Francesco di Paolo in somewhere in Pennsylvania. I forget the town, but they canceled that as well. So yeah, this coronavirus, this pandemic is definitely now, I don't want to say interfering in a way with our Italian feast season. And this is the season when people do come together, they want to be outside. It's gorgeous out, and to be able to spend this time. Now it's really, this is serious. This is some serious stuff that we're dealing with.
Tony, I think it's even worse, unfortunately. And yeah, to add to that list, I know the St. Anthony of Feast of Wilmington in the Italian neighborhood of Wilmington, that was canceled. But it's actually affecting the churches. I saw a post recently from the Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Down Neck, Newark, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And it was a sincere post, and it was appealing to our charity to help them, because without being able to go to mass, without the weekly donations there, their bills are not getting paid. So, and I know that's going to reverberate throughout the country to many other small parishes. And a lot of these parishes were founded and built, literally built. And some of them were built by moonlight. I know, like Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Harlem, they were built by the Italians after a long day's work, where they'd even get paid in bread in some cases, and not even money, in fiat money. And then they would go there and contribute whatever their talents were, whether they were artisans, they were stone masons and things like that, to help build the churches that they worshiped in, that still stand today. So absolutely. That's something where we're just getting completely crushed, unfortunately, right now.
So I know that each of you, I know John and Umberto and Ray, we were talking a little bit before, Stephen, that we're trying to somehow, I guess, raise funds now to help, whether it's in Italy, who really has been hit hard by this virus, but also here in America, trying to get, the right kind of masks for our frontline workers and for the PPEs and stuff like that. So can each of you guys kind of tell a little bit about, what your organizations are doing to kind of, to raise funds in this time?
I think Umberto should go first.
Thanks.
That's okay.
Okay. So actually, we started the fundraising as soon as possible, because I knew that it was coming in the United States, and I wanted to ask for money to American people before it would hit hard in the United States. I happen to be friends with the general director of the most important Italian contagious diseases hospital, which is the Spallanzani Hospital, and it's an excellence of Italian research and healthcare. It is where it sorted out a vaccine for Ebola in 2009, and before that, they worked at one of the drugs that worked with HIV. So I asked the general director to shoot a video because I wanted to ensure as much as possible that the funds would go straight to the Spallanzani Hospital, which will happen. And then we started asking for money. And we raised 30K, 30,000 euros. And the goal is 50K, but we are waiting for a very generous donation that will bring there in a few days. I cannot say more because until it's not in the bank account of Spallanzani, I don't want to spoil or say anything, but it's coming, and it's coming from New York. And so we're very happy about this because, I've been spending my years actually telling here in Italy how much the Italian Americans love Italy. And that's true. And this is one of the proofs. It's not the proof because already in the past, the Italian Americans have done beautiful charity for Italy. And of course, I understand that this is different because when there is a earthquake in Italy, there is not an earthquake in America, while right now you're hit more than us. And so we decided to stop the fundraising. I mean, the fundraising will stay open, but we'll stop the campaign. We won't ask for any more money on Sunday, April 19, because I don't want to give the idea that we are insensitive asking for money to the Americans. And also because, of course, I'm very glad that there are a lot of beautiful fundraisings to help Italy and among the Italian Americans, which I was sure because I know the big heart of the Italian American community. So we're very happy about the donations that we raised. In the Spallanzani Hospital, there will be another video with the general director who thanks everybody, and she shows that part of that money will go to the research for a vaccine, and hopefully, who knows, maybe the vaccine could come straight from the Spallanzani Hospital from the money donated by the Italian Americans. And then we will do another video when we can to show the Spallanzani Hospital, the structure, to let the people see where the money went. So thank you. Thanks very much to all of you. Thanks to Ray and to John that were kind to talk about the fundraising. Thank you very much to everybody. I'm really, I don't have the words, and I'm a journalist. I work with words, but it was amazing. And I was very, very, very sincerely happy and thankful for the donations.
Thank you, Umberto. John?
So I'm in a very similar boat to Umberto because one of the hats that I wear besides the show is I'm the U.S. delegate and representative for the Constantinian Order of St. George, which all of you guys have interacted with. And the Constantinian Order of St. George is an ancient Catholic chivalric knighthood that is under the Grand Mastership of the Borbone delle Due Sicilie, which was the royal family of the southern half of Italy and Sicily, where 87% of the Italian American community finds its roots. So the Constantinian Order operates very much like the Knights of Malta or the Order of the Holy Sepulchre, in that it's an independent Catholic league of knights and dames, and obviously it's headquartered in Rome. It was headquartered in Naples until the Risorgimento, but we won't go off on that tangent. But it is in the heart of this situation right now, and the order has done a lot to dedicate itself, particularly in modern times, to serving those in need. And when this came up, our Grand Master, the Prince, decided that he would seed a new fund for Italian hospitals in the south of Italy with a gift of 50,000 euros, and challenged we, the delegates and the knights and dames around the world, to try to raise as much as we could to grow this fund. So we set out through our delegation and through GoFundMe to create our own fundraising tool for Americans so that they could get the tax benefits based on our nonprofit status. And so far, internationally, the fund, through all the delegations around the world, we've raised about 25,000 here in the U.S., and we've got some gifts coming down the pipe. We're trying to raise 100. That's our goal, just internally. We've been able internationally to raise about 175,000 and give 30,000 to a hospital in Cosenza, and 50,000 yesterday was given to I'm going to forget the name of the hospital in Naples. It's the only hospital in the world where none of the staff, be it doctors or nurses or staff, has been infected. Cutugno, thank you. I should have thought of the singer. And we were able to give a $50,000 gift there yesterday. And then we have hospitals highlighted in Sicily, in Molise, Abruzzo, and Basilicata, and the southern regions to give to as this fund grows. So much like Umberto says, it's very difficult to solicit campaign support while our country is suffering equally. But the truth of the matter is, if we're really objective, particularly the Italian American community, you know, the hospitals in Italy, very much so in the South, there are areas where there are simply less concentration of facilities, less supplies, less access to critical response materials. And this is a very good international cause. And sometimes, you know, as a community like ours, where we really do unite two flags in one heart, as Umberto so brilliantly said when he started his organization, sometimes you do have to put one on, you know, in support and kind of make a decision. So we're hopeful that we can continue to raise money. We've got hundreds of knights and dames around the country, and all of the friends and supporters and family. So we're really trying to make a considerable gift, because it's going to go directly to these hospitals, and I think there's some serious needs.
Thank you, John. And now, Ray, we were talking a little bit that just I think it was just today that you started the GoFundMe page along with the Italian American Baseball Society.
Yes. So
can you kind of explain how that
came
to be?
Absolutely. So I have a friend who is he owns a global medical and pharmaceutical supply company in the maritime industry. So you know, I was kind of thinking about the fact that, well, you know, I have this relationship, and there's clearly a dramatic need for face masks and gloves, specifically here in New York. And it dawned on me that since this gentleman happens to have a warehouse here, let me just ask and see. I bet you he has nothing, but it's worth an ask. So I asked if there was any sort of supply, and he said, yeah, in fact, there happens to be a decent amount of supply. It's, you know, the demand is outweighing the supply, but it's such that at the moment they do have supply. So for the sake of expediency, I already had a GoFundMe set up for Italian Enclaves to create our website. We hit our goal, and so it's still open. And instead of going through, you know, kind of like a semi-bureaucratic process of applying for a new GoFundMe campaign, whereby you have to go through all sorts of approvals, and with the way things are, you don't want to risk taking 3, 4, 5 business days for that. We just went ahead and augmented. I checked with GoFundMe to make sure this was okay first, of course, and we augmented the existing campaign, shifted gears to be able to go ahead and raise money. We set a very minimal amount of a goal of $6,000, which already really is a $3,000 net goal, because $3,000 has been raised for the Italian Enclaves to build the website out. But the $3,000 that is surplus to that is going to go towards immediately purchasing KN95. The distinction is the KN95s, unfortunately, are made in China, but they're nevertheless going to facilitate what we want them to. Surgical masks and gloves. So, I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling that we have such a real shortage of this stuff for local cops, firemen, nurses, doctors, and other frontline EMT responders, you name it. So based on the fact that we happen to have this stuff available, you know, in one of the boroughs, we're raising the money. And in short order, we've already got contributions. As we speak, I published this at 3 o'clock. We've already got money flowing in as we speak. And I think we're going to far surpass our goal. And then the idea is I'm working with the District 43's councilman, which is the councilman who presides over Bay Ridge, Dyker Heights, Bensonhurst, Gravesend, and a portion of Staten Island, to go ahead and let them, once we get everything aggregated, allocate it proportionately to the hospitals, to the firemen and police stations that are in these areas. So we're praying that we can get this done in short order so that we can take advantage of the current supply that happens to be there, and obviously the tremendous necessity for it to be procured. So we're just praying that we can get this done and facilitate it. And I really appreciate all the efforts that you put forth, Umberto, and what you're doing. It's just absolutely commendable. And John, what you're doing is absolutely commendable, and the other knights and dames of the Constantinian order. And I want to just say this too. I have to give credit to John Napoli. I really want John on the board. He's a very busy guy. He's a pious man. He happens to be one of the nicest people I've ever met in my entire life. I learned so much from him. He's so sincere. And because of his work with Il Regno, the blog that inspired many of us to, I think, utilize social media as a tool. I think he was really the first one on the scene there, where he went around and took photos of all the Italian saints and processions and saint statues, I should say. He was just a major inspiration to me. So to not even give him any credit right now, it's just slipped my mind. So I want to take the opportunity, John, if you're watching, and if you watch this at a later time, thank you for all you've done and for all you do, and being an inspiration to us, because
he's a very humble guy, but everything you say is absolutely true. Just got it.
Spot on, right?
Brilliant and kind, and he's got it all. He's just very humble and camera shy, apparently. But we have to get him over that.
I'm trying to convince him to start a podcast, but he's fighting me on it left and right.
Let's try, John. Come on, I think we can do it.
I think Il Regno cast would be great.
Yep.
Definitely, absolutely. So actually, just today, I think the governor of New York, he announced that he signed an executive order that everybody that's out in public now has to wear masks.
Correct.
Wow.
So that's that. I mean, to think about, okay, first it was just when you went to the supermarket or you went to the store, but now it's literally, if you're jogging, if you're walking, you need to wear a mask. So I think that is another topic to talk about a little bit, is kind of how are we living our lives during this time as Italian Americans in quarantine. So obviously, I think the person that can speak to it really well, because he hit Italy first, would be Umberto. So how are you spending this quarantine time? Are you allowed to go out? Are you like, what is kind of some of the, like, what's going on in your home and in your head? And
yeah, so today I went out. I go out once a week to go to the supermarket, and it's I don't want to go to the supermarket anymore. It's physically and psychologically such a burden, and really I don't want to go out. I'm afraid, and we've been here for 38 days, and I really don't know when it will end. I think that this phase 2 everybody talks about will be more dangerous and difficult than phase 1, because as a matter of fact, you just shut down everything, and of course it's very damaging to the economy. Of course it is. But basically, you are protecting people. The problem is when you have to reopen something. What are you reopening? Who are you allowing out? We now can go out for 3 reasons. If you go to buy food, if you go to buy drugs, or if you go to the doctor, or if you go to work. You have to bring a paper with you, and police will stop you and ask you, where are you going? Show me the self-certification. But the problem is that there's a lot of people who is tired. And as the numbers are going very, very slowly in the right direction, outside is beautiful, the spring sun, and people is tired, you can understand that there's a lot of people who says, I want to go out. But it's very dangerous, because the virus it's out there and will be out there for months. And so we humans are not, used to this kind of thing. And the other problem is that I will talk about this in one of my next videos, is that every time there is a hope, there's somebody, a scientist, who unfortunately says, yeah, but that's a problem. There's a problem. You have, they're looking for a vaccine, but the virus is mutating. The lockdown is going to end, but there will be another probably. And then you got to go out, but you got to wear the mask. And then if you catch the virus, you have antibodies, but then you can catch it again. If you are 14 days in quarantine, that's okay. But no, now the quarantine is 28 days in Lombardy. So every time, there's something that gives you hope, there's somebody who unfortunately says there's a problem. And so, we humans are probably not used to this kind of, it's not a marathon, it's a decathlon of marathons. We're not used to, I was not trained to this.
No, you're right. I mean, I'd say we are. I mean, humans are social beings to begin with. So for us to kind of be stuck in this whatever four walls in your room or in your house, it kind of plays on our minds a little bit, right? I mean, it kind of affects our, like you said, affects our psychological well being, which I think is another important point. Is that we really have to. That's why I think podcasts like this that we can talk to other people. It kind of makes our minds, work a little bit. So we're not just watching the news 24/7, and it'll literally will drive you nuts.
You're right, Tony. You're so right. Let me say this. I've been on, now this is the luxury I've had to be here 3 times with you on the podcast, and it's all been during the quarantine. And I have to say, even though right now we're talking about the quarantine, it doesn't feel like we're talking about the quarantine.
You're right.
It's like every other quarantine discussion is kind of doom and gloom, and it's just psychologically berating. But this is an escape because we're all folks who enjoy each other's company to begin with, and have spent time and know what it's like to be in one another's company, and we frankly enjoy it. And this is how we're able to do it now. I recommend this, or just Zooming, I guess, is whatever you want to call it. I think there's other applications for I wouldn't know, but this one in particular has been helpful. And just being on your podcast is great. It really is uplifting, and watching it is uplifting because you can temporarily forget about it.
It's just tough. That's tough. It's a tough thing. John, how are you doing in quarantine?
Well, I have been in a very, very strict quarantine because I was in New Orleans for St. Joseph's Day when this all broke. So I literally, landed on the ground in New Orleans, and anybody who follows our YouTube channel can see we thought we were going to be there for 3 or 4 days of revelry to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the St. Joseph's Society parade. And by the time we landed with 600 pounds of pasta to be made, we found out that the parade had been canceled by the city, and then quickly thereafter, most of the subsequent events the supplementary events were canceled. So we did our pasta making, and we got to see all of our dear friends down there, and it was obviously very bittersweet. But then we got back on the plane, landed in New York, and I came right to my apartment. My wife had been on lockdown for 3 or 4 days, and that was it. So I didn't want to, run any risks. We did make a decision after 2.5 weeks that we would relocate to a place that my brother and I have a little bit out into the country, and my parents could come here, and my other brother is nearby. So we made a decision to sort of take that gamble and be with my family. And so it's been great, 2 weeks plus with my parents and my wife, and my brother's around the corner. But we're all very, very cautious. And so I have been outside in the yard, but really, honestly, living in complete lockdown. We've done a lot as a family a lot of things that we didn't think we'd be doing, like even, FaceTiming my grandparents, and my grandmother is making sausage. She hasn't made it in a bunch of years. Or we've been making bread every day, and we've been really sort of honing our traditions and spending family time, staying away from devices, and just little things that we used to do, I think, that you just don't think you have time for. So in some ways, this has been a very positive time for everybody, because it's easy to imagine that, yes, we are not meant to be like this, right? We need to get out. And whenever anybody talks about how the world's never going to be the same, I always, the optimist in me says, of course the world's going to be the same, because we're having a hard enough time getting people to stay in the damn house as it is. Like, nobody's going to swear off sports for the rest of their lives. It's just a small percentage of the population. I think we're going to see a return to normal because we're a very resilient species. But I also think I've found a lot of positives in this, and time with family, time with my wife. I mean, my wife and I, we both work. We rarely get that quality time when we're home decompressing. So we've done so much together, and just, little things that traditions that we had reserved to a more innocent time before this phone was here and internet was everywhere. And so we've been enjoying it.
And how about you, Stephen?
Well, I guess I've been blessed and cursed because excuse me. The law firm that I worked for let go the first day, like half the staff, but thankfully kept me and other attorneys on. And I wondered, well, how are we going to do this? And after we're done catching up on paperwork in a week or two, will we be done? But thankfully, we're the plaintiff side. We represent the injured parties, the victims of medical malpractice, but the attorneys that represent the other side need to work too. So we've been doing a lot of things that as I said, I came off of a settlement conference that lasted 6 hours today, thanks to Zoom. I've had depositions every day. So, as I'm sitting here feeling guilty that the St. Rocco Society hasn't done anything, not more, but anything yet for the effort to fight this disease, I realized I've been working 11 hours a day. So it's okay. I didn't think I could do it with my guy here wanting to bother me, but he has school online, and my parents thankfully live on the first floor of my house. So I'm not in their face too much, but I know they're there, and they were with us for Easter and Palm Sunday. And soon the garden will be my salvation. It's time. My wife just asked me, she could text me. I thought something was wrong. Do you want me to take the coverings off your fig tree? I said, don't touch the fig tree. Give me some joy. Let me do that. It's going to rain the next 3 or 4 days. And early next week, I'll take the cover. They've been on this long. They can stay on a little longer. So that's the story.
So let's talk a little bit about the Italian. I mean, I guess we'll kind of change the subject a little bit for the last. We can talk all night, but I know you guys have things to do too. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Italian enclaves and kind of where do you guys? Well, I know Umberto is from Italy, so the whole country's an Italian enclave. But where are you guys? Like, what are your Italian enclaves? Where are you from here in the States? Right?
Yeah, right. I come from Bay Ridge. I mean, it's not necessarily an Italian enclave. According to the 1960 census, there were 50% of the population of Bay Ridge was Italian. I mean, it's often referred to as Italian neighborhood. But it certainly isn't, a designated Italian enclave, one would say. But being that the case, it's conveniently located so that I'm next to Diker Heights. I'm next to, which is next to Bensonhurst, which is, close to Borough Park. Sunset Park had a little Italian enclave. The St. Rocco's Church down there is a testament to that, which is still standing on 27th Street between 4th and 5th Avenues. Then there's Carroll Gardens. So I'm centrally located and I had friends, family in all these different places growing up. So that's my pedigree. That's where I come from. One of the things that, right now that I have to say is this is another blessing, even as a blessing and a curse. It sort of is. My professional life is very interesting because I work tirelessly throughout the day in between what I'm doing for the Italian Enclaves Historical Society and some of the volunteer work that I do in investment banking and private equity. And one of the companies that we've raised almost $150 million for to date is in the forefront of fighting COVID right now. And they actually have a therapy, which is very interesting. And it's worked very, very well. The FDA has granted them fast track status to be able to go ahead and treat patients that are very, dire straits. And it's worked in many, many cases where they've been given the treatment and they've gotten better. So I've got to say that's another blessing, not a curse, in my life that, I could compound with all the other blessings, such as being able to work with fellas like you.
John, where are you from?
I am originally born in an Italian enclave in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Some people call it Williamsburg Greenpoint. Really the northern part of Brooklyn, sort of close to the border with Queens. It's an area that was historically Italian American with communities from Nola and Campagna, people from Teggiano in the Valle di Diano, people like myself who have roots in the little Comune di Sanza, which is up in the mountains there in the Valle di Diano as well. And it's famous, I hope, around the world, at least in Brooklyn and in the United States, for its feast of the Giglio in July, which is where the Nolani replicate the famous feast there in Campagna. And it's a great neighborhood and still got a lot of its heart and soul left. It became kind of a hipster art neighborhood in the 90s. And so now the hipster, popular, expensive, hippie, whatever you call it, yuppie part has sort of eked into our Italian enclave, but we're doing the best we can. We've still got Bamonte's 120-year-old restaurant and things like that. So
yes.
Yeah, we're putting up the good fight.
Excellent. And Stephen?
Well, I'm born in Bensonhurst, so I guess that that speaks for itself. I lived in Dyker Heights currently and for like the last 25 years. But as Ray said, there weren't fences between the neighborhoods. My grandparents, may they rest in peace, lived here in Dyker. So I always felt like a dual resident of both places. And my grandparents all from Italy to the Lower East Side. My grandfather lived for a few years as a very little boy in East Harlem. And then his family moved to, South Plainfield, which had a tiny little Italian American.
South Plainfield, New Jersey?
New Jersey, yes.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Now you piqued Tony's interest. Somebody call
you
Pat
did.
O'Boyle.
Yeah, because it's funny because Ray, yesterday we were talking to Danielle, and didn't you say some of her family settled in that South Plainfield area?
Yeah, I forgot the name, but we got it, and they have.
Yeah, I think literally. Yeah, there were a lot of Basilicata people and Calabrese people. The family lore.
Got the chills.
Is that my grandparents, my mother's dad's parents came with my grandfather at, I think he was 18 months or about 2 years old, and they lived in East Harlem. Now, I always thought my great-grandmother had a lot of births and a lot of stillbirths, and then she took in orphans just to nurse them, because then when they would not let an Italian-American immigrant woman adopt children, they'd take them away, and she'd get upset. And my great-grandfather said, enough, you can't do it anymore. You lose the baby and you go crazy, then you want to keep the next baby that you're taking care of, and they won't let you. So I always thought that was the reason why they transferred to New Jersey. But I learned from my mother, you've been saying this story wrong for a long time, was that your grandfather liked to, as a young man, probably 12, 13, liked to swim in the East River. And your great-grandfather was afraid he was going to drown. So he said, I have to get my son away from being so close to water. And he had worked on a railroad in Italy, in Basilicata. So he had a little bit of knowledge of that industry. And apparently in South Plainfield, he was able to get some type of a job there. He died, unfortunately, at I think 49 from pneumonia, from working outdoors. And my great-grandmother then packed them up, and they went to Newark, where they lived for quite a while.
Wow.
And then from there, they bought I don't know how this woman, who literally had a young widow working in a factory making bombs during the Second World War. I mean, they always tease she was tough. She even made bombs. And from there, they bought a house in Nutley, and some of the family still lives in Nutley. So although I'm a New Yorker 100%, I have a strong family connection to New Jersey.
I never knew that, Stephen. I never knew that. That's an amazing story. Yeah. We got to talk more about that. We have time, but that's
again how these things how these communities were separate but kind of interconnected. My grandfather, my mother's father, the one that wanted to swim, and his father had to drag him out of East Harlem. He was out of work when he was in his early 20s because it was Depression time. And his mother and father said, you go to the Lower East Side and stay with our cousin because there's more work in Manhattan than in Jersey. So while staying there, he saw my grandmother walk down the street and said, who's that girl? And my cousin said, I don't know, some girl from some town in Basilicata like us. I think the father is from the same town we're from. I'm going to marry her. Oh, you're crazy. And P.S., they got married. And my grandmother, he wanted to go back to Jersey. And my grandmother said, listen to me. I'm from Manhattan. I'm a city girl. I'm not going to go live in the woods. So that's not happening. That's the way they refer to Jersey, the woods.
Don't tell my wife that story. I'm trying to get her to move to the suburbs, and she's kicking and screaming.
My grandmother said no. So they compromised, and that was the time when so many Italian immigrants and their first-generation children were moving to Bensonhurst. And they lived, I think, in an apartment in Borough Park for a short period of time, and then in Bensonhurst. And my grandfather eventually, by sweat and tears, they bought a house in Dyker Heights, and still in our family. But so there was always connection between either their Paisan connections or just work connections, bringing Newark and the Lower East Side and East Harlem and Williamsburg and Bensonhurst all together. So
that's wild. Now, Umberto, were you born and raised in Rome?
Yeah. But I have an Italian enclave too, because I happen to represent the Italian American Museum of New York here in Italy. And so I fashioned myself to think at Mulberry and Grand as my home in New York. Of course, it is not, but I care very much for the museum, which now is renovating. They're building up the new buildings. But that's where I learned the first things about the Italian American community. And let me tell you that I had a great mentor, which is Joe Scelsa, and That's where my heart is when I'm in the United States. Even if, of course, I'm lucky to have friends all over the country actually, and in several enclaves, in Chicago, in San Francisco, Detroit, Boston, and let me tell you, it's amazing how these people care about the community. uh, America and Italy, they actually are living proofs about the fact that there are two flags in one heart.
Man, amen.
It's so true. Tony, I want to say this. It's really interesting. The other day, somebody messaged me on Instagram, and he mentioned I'm a fan and I love following your stuff in the St. Rocco, and because we were posting stuff about St. Rocco to pray for COVID and the end of the plague, and he mentioned that they have a procession and feast, which is held on the same day as the one that we coordinate with Stephen, that Stephen coordinates in Lower Manhattan. And theirs is up in a town in Massachusetts that I didn't even know about. And I've done pretty extensive research. So it's mind-boggling how many different Italian neighborhoods, Italian enclaves that there are. I'm still learning about them. And they're actually well populated with quite a few Italians till this day. It's really incredible.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think they're sorry, Tony, but
go ahead. Good.
Sometimes I think that they've preserved things even better than we have because of their isolation. Sure. But also because they knew, there's small numbers. We have to do this. I think the Italians of Brooklyn and Manhattan always felt like, if I don't do it, my neighbor will do it. Oh, well, there's a million feasts for St. Anthony. We don't have to do this one. But when you're in a small community, and they also kind of brought usually one or two towns. I know my wife's relatives that emigrated from Campania to Australia. The town they live in, you're either from their town in Campania or you're from this town in Provincia Cosenza in Calabria. Just two towns make up the Italian population of that town in Australia. I think a lot of that is true in Pennsylvania and other parts of our country. And so because they were more homogeneous.
That's a great point. Because even like where I grew up in Lodi, New Jersey, same kind of thing. A couple of towns in Sicily, a couple of towns in Molise, a couple of towns in Campania, and that's really it. So that's a great point. I think before we end, though, I think that we should talk a little bit about how we can support Italian American businesses during this pandemic. How we can still. I know it's tough to actually go out and shop at the different restaurants or the different stores because a lot of times they are closed. But how can we support them, and then how can we support them once they come back? So I guess that's kind of a good way to kind of close this conversation out. So one of you gentlemen want to jump in on that. Even support a business in Italy. Don't be afraid to buy panettone or colombo or whatever it is.
I think the problem with that, Tony, is that a lot of the Italian products, I tried to get Pagano seeds, which are from Scafati, I think, in Campania, and they had none left in the U.S. because I guess they were waiting for the 2020 batch, and there doesn't seem to be any way to get. And I love, if I'm going to get seeds, I'm getting them from the South, and I had some left plus my own heirloom seeds that I use, but I made that effort because I thought now more than ever, our people in the South are suffering. I mean, I've read, I don't know if this is so, but greater from the economic devastation of COVID than the actual plague that is killing so many of our brothers and sisters in the North. I think our people in the South are going to suffer more from the economic problem. And let's pray.
Stephen, where do you get the seeds? Can you shout out a business or website?
There was a place called Lake Valley Seeds. I believe it's in Pennsylvania, but they will not take online orders. It's probably, I used to buy it in every neighborhood store here. I mean, vegetables, the supermarkets had them. But again, they exhausted last year's supply, and this year's supply was interrupted. And, for those of us who live like I do in what's still pretty much an Italian enclave of Dyker Heights, every business I go to within walking distance of my home is an Italian-American business. But that, of course, isn't helping the restaurants. And, shout out to Peppino's Brick Oven Pizza, our friend Joe Mancino, who is, one of the most generous Italian-Americans. Yeah, Bay Ridge guy. And, we've ordered in from his place, but how you do it when you don't live in the Italian enclave, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe others have an idea.
Well, let me tell you, I mean, a couple of things we got to be really thoughtful about. First and foremost, a lot of these businesses that do have online business or may not have an online storefront, but do ship and send, like yesterday, We got a couple boxes from different businesses that we support, friends of ours who are, trying to keep these things going. And they're not just businesses, they're our history. And so, I every time you see one of these older, like we had dinner, Tony, not that long ago in a restaurant that people say might not be there very long. And you could close the best 5-diamond Italian restaurant, Michelin star, whatever, that opened in 1980, and it will be sad because you'll miss the plates. But if you close a restaurant that's been around since 1900, you close an entry point into our physical history and a place to reconnect. It's like closing a church,
Right.
not to be
Right.
profane around the sacred. But so I keep saying to everybody, first and foremost, if you have a place like that that you're worried about, then order some food from them and tell other people to do it. Everybody's on the phone 24/7, so just start messaging and let people understand that this is a you get to eat and you do a good work for the community. But support these businesses. I know my friend David Greco up at Mike's Deli, they're shipping boxes. So I asked David, I said, David, we've run out of X, Y, and Z. Can you send it to me? He said, absolutely, I could send it to you. The next day, I got a beautiful box with all this stuff. And I said, we're going to send it to all the people we care about. So if you have loved ones or elderly family that aren't able to go shopping, call an Italian deli, call an Italian grocery. They will do that. They're in business. So ship a box of food from there instead of, who's going to get grandma a bag of groceries. And the, the meat markets on Arthur Avenue. I know Danielle O'Terry was saying, I think last time we were on here, they're doing booming business, selling stuff all over the place. You can get, people are worried they can't get food because they're thinking they got to go on Peapod or this or Shop and Dop,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Go to your local guy, shop Italian, and they will do that for you. It doesn't have to be an app to do that. It's food, it's shipment. We've been mailing things for hundreds of years. And I think most importantly to me, as I keep coming back to, particularly as we talk about the South, we talk about this on our show a lot. Southern Italy has been experiencing in the past 10 years, Umberto, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you'd agree, a renaissance in terms of tourism, particularly after the Arab Spring. Naples as a city, I've been going to Naples my whole life. It is a different city than it ever was. And Palermo and Sicily and these sites that, look at Puglia, look at what the internet and social media has done to show the beauty of the South, Matera and the Year of Culture. And I know people are going to be anxious and nervous, but what I keep saying to them is, first and foremost, you're going to travel again, right? So work on your own psychology, get that out of your head, because nobody's going to stay under the bed for the rest of their lives. So get over that, whatever couch you have to lay on and talk about it. And when you do get over that, go online and book a cheap ticket to Italy. Make sure that it's refundable and you can keep kicking it down the road. Take advantage of the difficulty that we're going through to get whatever deals you can. And if you've talked for years about how you can't afford to go to Italy, take advantage of the fact that there's a crisis. And whenever this thing is gone, you'll be able to use that voucher and go to Italy and do it. And go to a small town in the South and go to somewhere off the beaten path, because this is a country that needs it.
God, I love John. John. No, really, we are working on something called Io Torno in Italia, because now people is trying to say Io Resto in Italia, because Italian tourism will be in Italy. There will be probably nobody who will go abroad for a lot of reasons. And this year will be Io Resto in Italia, I stay in Italy. But we're working on something called Io Torno in Italia, because we want to dedicate the whole 2021 to Italians abroad, not just Italian Americans, Italians all over the world. We have 60 million people of Italian heritage all over the world, and we would like to dedicate 2021, which is also the 25th anniversary of our republic, because in 1946 Italy voted for the republic. And if you're lucky and good, but we're talking with somebody in the government, it would be nice to dedicate the whole year to Italians abroad, telling them to come back and to do a lot of events all over the country, all over the year, dedicated to Italians who come from the small town, which will dedicate them the festa or the, whatever the main event of the year is. They don't have to spend money. They just have to dress the event for those sons and daughters who are all over the world, because the first kind of tourism we would like to have is for our brothers who are all over the world come back. I'm also working to have a real estate business to help people from all over the world to buy houses in Italy, which, as John said, it's a crisis, and you have to exploit the fact that it's a crisis. And of course, if there are houses that can be bought, why not? But first of all, thank you very much for what you guys are doing. You are Italians like me. I'm not Italian, and you are not. Everybody here is Italian. But on behalf of we the Italians, at least, I love you guys, and thank you very much for all you're doing.
Thank you, Umberto.
Thank you so much.
Tony,
That's beautiful. Thank you.
That was really good. Tony, one thing too, which is really funny, is that, well, it's not funny, it's just coincidental. I created the Support Italian American Businesses hashtag a while ago, about a year ago maybe, and the reason why was because the nature of business, right, is Darwinian. I mean, the strongest survive. And I noticed that, I mean, it was just truly unfortunate that a lot of the businesses I would go in to take photos for or of, in a lot of cases, you know, in different places, like, you know, I'm not going to name specific businesses, but let's call it like Connecticut and Boston, wherever. The people, in some cases, were not very, let's call it akin to what I was doing, and they weren't receptive. And I found that to just be a function of, you know, certain natures, of course, and in the past and things like that. But it was a very big impediment for these people to be able to go and bridge the technological gap that could potentially help them survive. And so I just nevertheless would go and post them and support them, because even if they weren't conscious of how it could manifest for them positively in their business and wind up helping them in the long run, it was still necessary to do, I felt, on my part, because of the nature of what we do. But that is now, unfortunately, being amplified by what's happening, and businesses that have been ahead of that curve, like you mentioned Mike's on, and some of the businesses that are up in on Arthur Avenue, and some of the other businesses in Brooklyn that have taken to social media and to the web and figured out ways to use those types of implementations for logistics to build their businesses. That has been a big differentiating factor. And what I think is going to be a result of it is what was inevitably happening at any rate anyway, was this the consolidation of who's going to be left in the space, in these neighborhoods and in the business world of Italian businesses, because it's just inevitable.
Ray, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm so sorry, but I have business calls that I have to get to. Gentlemen, it was my honor to be with you, and San Rocco watch over us all.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye.
But just that's the thing. So I think there's just that inevitability is starting to really prove itself with what we're going through. So whoever really is ahead of that curve, and you know, who has access to social media and all of that, is really going to have a better staying power.
Yeah, absolutely. So, gentlemen, before we leave, could you just tell us how we can get in touch with you, how people listening or watching can get in touch with you? Give us your website, social media, stuff like that. John?
So you can find me at ItalianAmericanPodcast.com. Our social media, our Instagram is at Italian American. You could find our YouTube channel, Italian American Podcast. We're on your favorite podcast playing platform. And if you could figure out my own social media handles from that, you're more than welcome to send me a message, and I'll do my best to figure it out and write back. But yeah, happy to have everybody around.
Excellent. Umberto?
Yeah, we are at WeTheItalians.com. We are on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Excellent.
And Facebook. And Facebook, of course.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forgot Facebook.
At Italian Enclaves on ENCLAVES on Instagram and Facebook. And it just keeps reminding me, everybody, what's an enclave? So I've got to share that Rocco Deserto post with everybody again. So.
Excellent. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for taking time out to talk with us today at the Table with Tony. Thank you again. I really do appreciate it. And
thank you,
I want to tell you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for coming on, Umberto, John.
Thanks.
I want you guys to please be safe out there. And when this is over, we definitely have to get together and have a big festa, a big feast, just to celebrate that this coronavirus is gone.
Yeah.
But, so definitely. Tomorrow night at 8 p.m., I will be interviewing Father Frank Donio. He is the director of the Catholic Apostolate Center in Washington, D.C. So he's actually a Jersey boy as well, from Hamilton, New Jersey. So we'll be talking to him about the feast down there. And of course, he's a Palatine. So we'll talk about St. Vincent Pallotti and some stuff with the Catholic Apostolate Center. And I guess how we can also grow in our faith during this crazy time that we're living in. So again, this is Anthony Scilia, better known as Tony Manja. You are watching At the Table with Tony. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Ciao for now.